Hello, welcome to the online webinar on the regional qualifications frameworks organized by the European Training Foundation. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Many countries have their national qualifications frameworks, or NQFs. These frameworks can be used to help individuals, giving them access to different pathways in the learning process. But what are the regional qualifications frameworks, or RQF? We will hear these abbreviations a lot today. What is happening with them and how many are there in the world? We're going to try to answer some of those questions today. Please send us your questions and we will answer them either during this event, there will be specific questions and answer sessions, or later on, so please make sure you reach out. Also, the recording of this meeting will be available on LinkedIn, so you can always come back and make your questions afterwards. Last but not least, I would like to invite all the participants and all our followers to prepare your mobile phones. I have mine here ready, because we will have some interactive exercises happening in a while. So please be ready to use your cell phones. And at this point, I'm happy to pass the floor to the Director of the European Training Foundation, Mr. Cesare Onestini. Cesare, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this meeting and to see you virtually all together from different corners of the world. So it's a big pleasure for the European Training Foundation to host this event. As many of you, I recognize some faces and names, are friends of ETF. You know what we do, but I also see some new names. So I would take this opportunity just to share with you that ETF is an agency of the European Union. We have almost 30 years of experience working on supporting reforms of education and training systems in countries outside of the European Union. And our main focus is on countries around the Mediterranean, to the east of the European Union, the Western Balkans, and what we call the Eastern Partnership, and in Central Asia. But the core work of the ETF, it's about the training systems, quality reforms, and supporting public authorities and providers in making sure that they give the best opportunities to their citizens. And in that sense, our work covers all good practice all over the world. In this context, the focus for us is also on qualifications within what we call our Knowledge Hub. And this Knowledge Hub work on qualifications looks at primarily the experience of the European qualification framework, supporting the development of these of the partner countries around the EU, connecting or developing their own qualification frameworks and taking also the experience of the European countries and seeing the experience of the partner countries. But we work very much in the international context, as many of you know, and we work hand in hand with the European Commission on this, which is setting the policy guidelines. We work with colleagues in CEDEFOP, we work with UNESCO, ASEM, others, and in the past 3 years, we have been involved in supporting the African Union in the development of the ACQF. So the European Training Foundation has been involved over many years in these areas, and we have a strong team, you see, and you will hear from many of our colleagues throughout the meeting. I will let them to introduce themselves, but many of you know them very well. The aim of the meeting today is really to share knowledge and open a dialogue. We want to map the interests that you have also from your different perspectives to see how we can support this dialogue in the months and years to come. And the basis for this first exchange is a study that we have done, talking to many of you and looking at where you are at in your experience and reflections on regional or national, but also regional qualification framework. Why do we think this is important? Well, we see the value of qualification frameworks in our daily work. I know I talk to a group which needs no convincing, but it's good to remind ourselves that really the work that we do on qualification frameworks is very closely linked to the support that we give for the quality of learning, for the recognition, and this by definition goes also beyond borders. But it goes beyond that, and as many of you know, and as the study shows, there is also a close connection between the development of regional qualification frameworks and the goals of regional economic communities. So there is a connection that is spreading out of the education and training field, and also supporting wider policy goals. And in that sense, I think the experience sharing that we want to do can contribute to these wider goals that we have. What is the starting point for the discussion today? The starting point is really your experience and your knowledge, and this sharing and bringing together. We also see from the study that will be shared that a lot of the experiences are very different, but many challenges are common. And I think that's where it's interesting to compare notes. We see also in this context that it's not easy, that regional qualification frameworks have to different degrees challenges and find it difficult to progress beyond certain stages. So identifying these roadblocks and what is the challenge and seeing how they can be overcome, I think it's also part of the knowledge sharing we want to put on the table today. Another point I think which is striking is that when obviously we are rooted in the European qualification framework as part of the mandate of our agency here, but the work with partners around has showed us that there is also a different type of challenges that we need to take into account when we look at low and middle income countries. There are different types of approaches that need to be looked at. And I think there, comparing the experience of the partner countries of ETF, which around the EU cover very diverse types of training systems and economic development, is also part of the richness of the discussion. So without further ado, I think it's time to give the floor to the experts and let them do the talking. But from the ETF side, please note that we are committed to continue supporting this exchange and this dialogue. We will be happy to see with you how best we can keep alive the discussion through social media or other platforms in whichever way suits your needs and your policy goals. And in on our side, we will continue working very closely with the colleagues. Some of them will be here today from the European Commission, from UNESCO, CEDEFOP, and other international agencies. And we remain committed to supporting important initiatives like the African Continental Framework, which I think shows that when there is a will, there is also the possibility to make fast progress. Thank you very much, and I wish you good progress in the conversation today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Cesare. I would like, just before going next to our next point, I would like to remind to all of our participants in Zoom to put your name and surname. Please do so, because we will need it for an exercise that we will be doing in the working group. So please put your name and surname in Zoom. And now I would like to pass the floor to Koen Nomden from the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion from the European Commission. Koen, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So thanks for the ETF, to the ETF for having organized this session this morning for those who are in Europe, or afternoon, evening, other time zones, and also again this afternoon we will repeat. So my name is Koen Nomden. I'm working in the European Commission in DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, and in there I'm responsible for the team that is in charge of the EQF advisory group of validation of prior learning and also of career guidance. Now, Cesare mentioned the role of the Commission is in this context really to set policy guidelines. And I would like to share with you some of these policy guidelines. And before, I will also say a few words about where we stand with the EQF and also about the external dimension of the EQF, because this is the reason why we are here together. So in July of last year, the Commission adopted the European Skills Agenda. And this agenda focuses on skills actions in order to contribute to the green and digital transitions that are needed, but also, of course, on the skills contribution to get out of the current COVID-19 crisis that is affecting all our countries. And it puts also in practice, and I would like to mention this, the first principle of the European Pillar of Social Rights, that is about access to education, training, and lifelong learning to everybody, everywhere in the EU. And this, of course, contributes also to the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular, goal number 4 on quality education and lifelong learning. The European Union has set ambitious goals. By 2030, 60% of adults should participate in learning every year, and 80% of adults should have basic digital skills. And as part of the skills agenda, there are actions on and upskilling, digital skills, skills for the green transition, transversal skills, micro-credentials, individual learning accounts, but of course also vocational education and training, European universities, to name a few areas. There are others too. Now, the reason why we are together today is about regional qualifications frameworks and the external dimension of the European qualifications framework. And in this context, I would like also to refer to the adoption last year of a new pact on migration and asylum that is aiming at creating more efficient and fair migration processes. And in this context, the launch of a talent partnerships is one of the key actions to develop sustainable legal pathways and attracting skills and talents also to the EU. And these partnerships aim to contribute to engage partner countries on migration and provide a comprehensive policy framework, as well as funding support for a mutual beneficial cooperation. And also an EU talent pool is being explored, tailored to admit high-skilled, specialized people from abroad. Now, in all of this, of course, qualifications play an important role. And we all know qualifications are important for employability, for access to further education and training, but they are also important, and this we should not forget, for personal achievement. Now, the key tool for qualifications in the EU is the European Qualifications Framework for Lifelong Learning, in abbreviation, the EQF. Now, just a few words on the EQF and where we stand. So the EQF is the European Reference Framework for Qualifications. It's a comprehensive framework. It covers all levels of qualifications. It's based on learning outcomes. Quality assurance is, of course, important. It covers all types of qualifications and also all levels. It covers higher education, vocational education, training, general education, but also it is open to qualifications from outside formal education and training. It's also open to validation of prior learning as a way to obtain a qualification, and as the focus is on learning outcomes and not on duration or institution of learning. The EQF, and I think this is important to stress, is a framework for transparency. There is no automatic recognition, but transparency should, of course, make recognition easier. The EQF is also fully aligned with the framework for qualifications of the European higher education area. Now, since the start of the EQF in 2008, 35 European countries have related their national frameworks to the EQF through a process that we call referencing. Referencing is, of course, a continuous process. And currently, most of the work that we do concerns reviews and updates of referencing to keep the referencing up to date. In the longer term, the aim of the EQF is to create a comprehensive map of qualifications in Europe and really to create transparency at European level. And EU member states, for this purpose, are invited to interconnect their qualifications registers at European level through a new platform set up last year, the Europass platform. And the EQF level should also become visible on new qualifications that are part of national frameworks. And all of this will make the EQF and the related national frameworks better known in Europe, because one of the challenges we still have is that the general public, but also employers, are not yet fully aware of the EQF and of European NQFs. Now, the EQF, of course, as a tool does not stand alone. It's part of a broader set of transparency tools for skills and qualifications. And to mention a few here, I would like to refer to the European Skills Classification, ESCO, the European Platform for Career Management and Lifelong Learning, which is Europass, and also the European Transparency Tools for Quality Assurance in higher education, and the European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System in higher education. Now, EU policies, all these tools support cooperation between EU countries. And this is because education and training itself is organized and the responsibility of each member state. A few words on the EQF external dimension. So the EQF aims at creating transparency of skills and qualifications at European level. But we are also working on the external dimension of the EQF to create transparency of qualifications for learners and workers across the globe. And this is why we are here together today. A start with this work was taken in the years 2014, 15, 16, when pilots took place to compare the EQF with Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. And in 2017, the EQF got a new legal mandate, and the external dimension was then included. And the focus of the external dimension is on comparing the EQF with qualifications frameworks outside the EQF area, both national frameworks and this is important, regional frameworks. A project group of the EQF advisory group was mandated in 2019 to work on possible criteria and procedures for comparing the EQF with qualifications frameworks from other parts of the world. And comparison means treating those qualifications framework as equal partners. Dialogue and mutual respect are key to this comparison exercise and also to wider cooperation surrounding it. Now, a comparison process should of course be done in a thorough way, and our group defined 11 possible topics for comparison. There needs to be solid documentation, also dialogue to seek mutual understanding and trust, and finally, the process should result in a joint comparison report that is published. And the overall purpose is to have more transparency of qualifications between the country or region concerned and the EQF countries. And like for the EQF, this will not result in automatic recognition of qualifications, but transparency can, of course, make recognition easier. As a result of the work so far, it was agreed to carry out 3 pilots to test the approach that we agreed in the group, namely one RQF, the Southern African Development Community framework, and 2 national frameworks, Ukraine and Morocco. Now, today's focus is on regional qualification frameworks. And it was clear in our work that when we started discussing RQFs, our level of actual knowledge of RQFs and how these are developing was quite limited. And the ETF, the European Training Foundation, quickly offered to carry out a study on regional frameworks in the world. And I would like to thank and also to congratulate the ETF and the researchers who carried out the study for their hard work and also for the clear overview of RQFs that the study provides. And you will see this, of course, in a few minutes. A last word about EU funding. The EU is the biggest donor in the world, and overcoming the COVID crisis is a need for all of us, and cooperation can help us to address common challenges in digitization of our qualification systems, in addressing climate change and new instruments such as micro-credentials. And COVID has learned us new ways to connect and meet, like today. Now, in the past, the EU already funded many projects. A few examples are the SHARE project for the ASEAN region, the African Continental Qualifications Framework, in which the ETF is involved, the development also of frameworks in India, Bangladesh, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Georgia. to mention a few, and furthermore, also the higher education framework for Central America. The focus of EU funding is very much on international partnerships. And currently, a new round of programming is starting, and in many countries, education and skills acquisition is a priority. Also, the Erasmus Plus program is offering opportunities for cooperation, and RQF initiatives, for example, could make use of Erasmus Plus grants as full partner organizations if they partner with European partners. And in this context, as you know, the European Training Foundation is supporting more generally the external dimension of the EQF, and is also ready to support exchange of experiences, as it was also mentioned by Cesar. I would like to conclude. And I would like to wish you a very interesting and fruitful session today. And I'm looking forward to our further discussions this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, depending on your time zone. And I will also be part of the breakout sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Koen. So now, dear participants, we are going to have an exercise. I would like to ask you to take your phones in your hands. And while you're taking them, I just want to quote some of the people coming here are from Portugal, Greece, Austria, Brussels, South Africa. I think we have Seychelles in here, and also a lot of people coming from different places on LinkedIn. So thanks for being with us today. I hope you have by this moment your phone. So if you could please open www.menti.com. That's the first step. Exactly. And you could dial the code 4622-6727. You can also use your camera on your phone and scan the QR code that you can see on your screen right now. So I'll give you a minute to open your phones, either use QR code to scan it or opening www.menti.com. And we want to ask you one question. So, how many regional qualifications frameworks exist? So how many are there in the world? We're talking about the globe. So how many regional qualifications frameworks initiatives, how many regional qualification framework exist? And for our followers on LinkedIn, you will find now the link to the Mentimeter as well. So you can access it easier. So again, I will repeat the question. How many regional qualifications frameworks exist in the world? I'll give you one more minute.
Results are on their way.
Thank you. So how many regional qualifications frameworks initiatives exist in the world? Let's start with the number. If we can project already the first results, I think that would be excellent.
Yes.
Okay, so 20 participants said that over 20, so a lot. 24, 25 now saying that up to 18. And 11 people said that 12 now said that 5. And at this point, I would like to ask Arjen Day. Arjen, what do you think about those results? And please tell us the correct answer.
We don't really have actually a correct answer because the situation is constantly changing. But what we saw last year is that there were 17 initiatives. Of course, all of these are not existing frameworks, but this was considerably more than we had expected before. So definitely the number is growing, and definitely it's also growing, especially in low and middle income countries in the Southern Hemisphere. So that's very important, I think.
Okay, thanks a lot, Arjen. So we know that at this exact moment there are 17, but the number is growing. I would like to ask also our technician, please put on the infographic, because I think we have a very nice representation of what the world looks like in terms of qualifications frameworks. So could you please put on the screen the infographic?
Yes, they're coming.
Thank you. I think the background that Arjen has already discovers a bit of the secret of the answer. Yes, there you go. If you could put it the full screen, please. Thank you. Yeah. So this is the map that will be presented, I guess, by Arjen as well later on, with the different geographical zones and the frameworks that are present. You will find the link to this infographic also in the chat of this webinar. At this point, I think I can pass the floor to Arjen to present you the regional qualifications framework around the globe. Arjen, the floor is yours.
Yes, so now we're going to move first of all to the presentation. So if I can see the presentation, then we can start. So first of all, I would like to say good morning to everybody. Good morning, and please keep your microphones closed. My name is Arjen Dij. I'm saying good morning because it's good morning in Torino, but of course, I know that there is, for instance, Salai from Fiji, and for her, it's already 8 o'clock at the evening. Now I'm going really to start quickly with our presentation because it's quite a lot of numbers of slides that we're going to go through. So just please. Now, so to start with our presentation, just just one moment. Yes. It's this presentation I will make with Eduarda Castelbranco from ETF and also Monica Outsinger from 3S, who has been helping us together with Julia Fellinger. But Julia is not here today. She gave birth 2 weeks ago to her daughter Aurelia. So on that positive note, let's start. Please write your questions in the chat in English or French. Now, let's go to the next slide. You're ahead of me, actually. What is important is that our presentation has 4 blocks of topics. We start with an overview of the current RQF developments, and then we're going to look at a number of comparative elements between the RQF initiatives. This is focusing mainly on the 15 initiatives that are outside the scope of the EQF and the qualification framework for the European higher education area. Then we zoom in on the African continental qualification framework in particular, because Africa is the continent with most of the RQFs and where our research coincided also with the mapping of the ACQF. And finally, we look at how we could develop a dialogue between RQFs. And this is the introduction in the interactive session. So let's go to the objectives of our study. We made this study to map the latest RQF developments and to explore also the feasibility of comparison with EQF, because as Koen explained in the recommendation of 2017, this was foreseen as a possibility to explore the comparison of the EQF with other NQFs and RQFs. So, and of course, we lacked an understanding of RQFs. So we needed to look more at it. But we didn't have much time, so we could not have a comprehensive study. So what we really did is following a pragmatic approach. We tried to find whatever was available online, but it was actually very limited. And then we've been very grateful for all the interviews that we have been holding with many of you who are here today, so that you could provide us also with additional information. And also from these interviews itself, we got a lot of information. So that's what we have based our study on. The work was carried out last year between July and October. We have done some updates recently in December and January, But of course, things are still developing. So let's go to the next slide.
When we started this work in the summer of 2020, one thing that became quite evident early on in our research was that there are more RQF initiatives than we knew existed. We were surprised actually by the number and also extent of developments ongoing. Written information about regional qualification frameworks that is publicly available and also easily accessible is rather limited. So for most initiatives, but not all, and you hear a bit about that later, this study had to rely largely on interviews with stakeholders. And what we experienced in the research was an eagerness and also enthusiasm from stakeholders to participate in our study, and also an openness of key informants to share also their challenges and struggles in their development processes. Without their support, as Arjen mentioned, we would not have been able to come up with this report. And this also shows, we believe, the potential for more dialogue on qualifications framework initiatives. This report seeks to stimulate thinking about comparison and possible linkages between RQFs. However, we also need to point out that given the nature of the evidence, our findings represent the snapshots of developments at a certain point in time, as Arjen also mentioned. So this work is very much reflecting work in progress in terms of both understanding RQFs, the progress in developing RQF initiatives, and also exploring different forms of cooperation between them. Next.
Yes, so we're now going to start with the overview of the global RQF initiative. So there was already a question of Raylan about this, and that's what we're going to address next. So we start with Europe. Europe was not part of the study, but we think for completeness, we have added it. There are two RQF initiatives that are very closely linked. They are interlinked. The European Qualification Frameworks for Lifelong Learning and the qualification framework of the European Area for Higher Education. Next. So this is already, Koen has already talked about this. The EQF for lifelong learning is an 8-level framework. And since Brexit, there are 38 countries involved in the EQF advisory group, which is the governing body for the EQF. The countries use 10 referencing criteria to relate their NQFs to the EQF. And 35 countries out of the 38 have already done that, and 4 already has presented an update of this report. Also, 31 countries include the EQF levels on certificates, diplomas, and supplements. And 15 countries have connected their national databases of qualifications through Europass. Next. The qualification framework of the European Higher Education Area is part of the Bologna process to create a European Higher Education Area. It includes 49 countries, which are mostly those of the EQF, plus the UK and countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. The focus is on 3 cycles for higher education, so what we normally call bachelor, master, and doctorate cycles, as well as a short cycle as part of the first cycle. The vast majority of these countries, they combined their self-certification to this framework with the referencing to the EQF. So they had one report to address the referencing and self-certification. The RQF is very strong in terms of credit, ECTS, quality assurance, the European standards and guidelines, and recognition practices. Next.
Let us continue with the initiative that is easily the most geographically dispersed of those we identified. Next, please. The Transnational Qualification Framework, in short TQF, is a 10-level framework that is intended as a translation instrument for the classification of qualifications between the 32 countries participating in the virtual university for small states of the Commonwealth. These so-called small states of the Commonwealth share some common challenges in the face of globalization and increased mobility of skilled professionals. Its major initial intent was to be a registration tool to enable countries to register their qualifications onto the framework and make them available to other small states. As the take-up of the TQF so far is not as high as intended yet, work is currently ongoing to modernize and update the framework. Next, please. So let us now take a closer look at initiatives identified in the East Asia and Pacific region. Next. Our first initiative is the Pacific Qualifications Framework, in short PQF. It comprises the states of the Pacific Islands Forum. The PQF is a 10-level translation device to facilitate the comparability and recognition of specific qualifications. Countries without their own national qualifications framework may adopt the PQF as well. The PQF was set up through mutual agreement between the countries and also initially funded by the Australian Aid Programme. And so far, a process of referencing to the PQF has been undertaken with 4 countries in total. There are 3 current priorities for the coming years for the framework. First is a review of the PQF. Second, having the PQF referenced against other regional qualifications frameworks and allowing for the cross-offering of qualifications across countries in the regions so that a PQF country may make available its qualifications to other countries. Next. The ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework, in short AQRF, is a common reference framework of 8 levels that enables comparisons of education qualifications across participating ASEAN member states, with ASEAN, of course, meaning the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which is an economic union of 10 member states. The AQRF, whose development started back in 2011, is first and foremost considered a quality assurance tool, using quality as a means to strengthen trust for mobility. So far, 4 countries have already undertaken their referencing to the AQRF, and a further 3 countries are ready or planning to undertake a formal referencing process in the near future. Next, please. So let us move now to take a closer look at the 3 initiatives identified in the Caribbean and Latin American region. So basically we move across the pond a little bit. The most well-known, next please, is the CARICOM Caribbean Community Qualifications Framework, which is a 10-level reference framework that seeks to act as a translation device that facilitates educational and labor market mobility across the CARICOM region, and also supports career progression and lifelong learning in that region. CARICOM, by the way, has 15 full members from Antigua and Barbuda to Trinidad and Tobago. The CQF forms part of a long-term strategy in the region to establish a regional training and certification system, to harmonize national systems, to develop regional standards, and to finally establish a regional system for assessment, certification, and recognition of skills. One of the current priorities of the CQF are to get at least 1/4 of the country's national qualifications frameworks aligned to the CQF by 2021. Next. The qualifications framework, next please. The qualifications framework, thank you, for higher education in Central America, or MQESCA, is an 8-level framework of which currently the upper 5 levels are populated. This qualifications framework initiative is the product of 2 consecutive EU-funded projects, and Kuhn has mentioned this in his introduction. The initiative is led by the Council of Higher Education Institutions in the region, the Consejo Superior Universitario Centroamericano. It is a tool for quality assurance and recognition of studies between Central American countries. So far, only pilot projects for a limited number of study programs have been undertaken, but there are plans to develop follow-up projects to expand the implementation of this regional qualifications framework and to receive funding for these initiatives. Next. And finally, in the Caribbean region, the Central American, sorry, the Alianza Pacifico, or Pacific Alliance, is a Latin American trade bloc formed by 4 countries, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, which are the 4 full members of this bloc. A dedicated working group is currently working on a proposal and a work plan for a regional qualifications framework initiative, with the key objective of supporting student and labor mobility in this region. Since 2020, so since last year, the Alianza Pacifico has received international support from Colleges and Institutes Canada, under which financial support is being provided for a 2-year project, which is currently still ongoing. At the end of this 2-year project and support, the aim is to have a proposal for a regional qualification framework initiative on the table. Next, please.
Sorry, yes. the Middle East and South Asia is a very interesting region from the point of view of RQF, because here we really have a global workforce working in the Gulf. There's a strong link to migration. And also there's the issue of diversification of more added value economies. We saw last year that there was a big economic crisis, especially because of COVID, that hit this region. Many migrants went home, and there's a growing need also for ICT skills and switching to online learning and working in the region. Now let's go to the next slide. The Gulf Qualifications Framework, the GQF, of the Gulf Cooperation Council involves Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. They have launched a common market in 2008, and in 2014 in Riyadh, they agreed to develop an RQF. It's proposed to be a 10-level framework with mobility as a central goal, as it is linking all NQFs to the GQF, but also eventually to the EQF. There has been a delay in implementation due to a number of reasons. First of all, some countries didn't have yet an NQF. For instance, Kuwait was the last one to develop an NQF. There has been some difficult relationships in the Gulf, but also, of course, the crisis caused by COVID has really had a big impact, a drop in GDP. And for instance, the National Qualification Authority in the UIA, which was in the lead for this RQF, they merged in July last year with the Ministry of Education. And it was very difficult for us to get information on where the progress is. So let's go to the next slide. The South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation include a lot of countries like Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka that are sending countries. They send people to work, especially also in the Gulf. A feasibility study has been carried out for an RQF by the Swiss Agency for Development and the ILO Decent Work office in South Asia. Today we have Gabriel Bordado here and also Andrea Bateman, who wrote the feasibility study. This framework is supposed to be linked with sustainable development, cooperation in VET, but also with the SAARC plan for labor migration. And to give you a sense of the importance of the labor migration, there were about 9 million Indian migrants working in the Gulf in 2018. So this is about harmonization of skills across the region, enable comparison of qualifications, and an 8-level framework is proposed that should cover secondary education, VET, skills acquisition, and higher education. And there is also a roadmap for implementation. And now the consultation is just ongoing. So let's go to the next initiative, which is the one which is not initiated by countries, but rather by organizations that are dealing with quality assurance. This is the Arab Qualifications Framework, which covers all the countries on the Arab Peninsula and also very many in Africa. And they are all part of the Arab Network for Quality Assurance in Higher Education. The members are volunteering. It doesn't have governmental support. There's a strong focus on transparent mechanisms and quality assurance. And the AQF is offering external verification of NQFs and of qualifications. This has started as a higher education initiative, which was also in the name, but actually in the meanwhile, the countries have also said, we want to expand to general education and VET. And they are proposing a 10-level framework, but only higher education part is populated at the moment. There is an important impact of the current situation also on online learning that is going to change the approach of this framework. Now let's go to the next slide.
Africa. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Eduardo Castelbranco. Africa, a compact continent of 1.2 billion population and a large share of youth. This inventory identified 6 RQF initiatives with some similarities and differences. 4 of them are related with regional economic communities. It is SADC, ECOWAS, EAC, and IGAD. We will see them right after. 1 is linked with the Quality Assurance and Recognition Intergovernmental Body, CAMES, and 1 is the African Union's own Continental Qualifications Framework in development. If national qualifications frameworks are social constructs, then RQFs are constructs with important cultural dimension, given the diversity of cultures of education and training and concepts of qualification systems they interact with. We will first move to Southern Africa, then to the West, and finally to the eastern part of the continent. Next. SADC. The Southern African Development Community is one of the largest regional economic communities in Africa, with 16 member states and over 350 million population. SADC qualifications framework is the most advanced RQF in Africa, established in 2011 by a political decision of the SADC ministers and effectively launched in 2017 with the name SADC qualifications framework. It is a comprehensive RQF of 8 levels. The SADC qualifications framework is a regional mechanism for comparability and recognition of qualifications, credit transfer, creation of regional standards, and facilitation of quality assurance. It comprises agreed principles, procedures, guidelines. The SADC qualifications framework is implemented around 6 programs led by the member states on a rotational basis. These programs are alignment, quality assurance, verification, articulation, recognition of prior learning and credit accumulation and transfer systems, advocacy and communication, and finally, governance. For example, South Africa leads the alignment program. Currently, 2 national qualifications frameworks have aligned to the SADC qualifications framework, and these are South Africa and Seychelles qualifications framework. Mauritius has also submitted its alignment report. From the start of implementation, the technical committee of SADC qualifications framework engaged in cooperation with other RQFs, notably with the EQF and ASEAN qualifications reference framework. Currently, the region is giving a new impetus to the SADC qualifications framework with new measures to support implementation, included in the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan 2030 and also in the SADC Labor Migration Action Plan 2025. This is very important. Next, CAMES, the African and Malagasy Council for Higher Education, or le Conseil africain et malgache pour l'enseignement supérieur, is an intergovernmental institution for the harmonization of policies and integration of the higher education systems of Western and Central Africa and the Indian Ocean. CAMES's activities are backed by a regional quality assurance policy. 19 countries are members of CAMES. All but one are French-speaking countries. CAMES is firstly a regional quality assurance and accreditation entity. But thanks to its program of recognition and equivalence of diplomas, le PRED, and its quality assurance program, it can also be considered a regional qualifications framework in higher education. In respect to the implementation of the system Licence Master Doctorat, LMD, CAMES plays a role of support, advice, and monitoring. You can see the member states of these different qualifications frameworks looking at the color. So CAMES, the blue part. Next, please. ECOWAS. Now we go to West Africa. The Economic Community of West African States includes 15 member states with a population of approximately 400 million persons. The ECOWAS Ministers of Education have approved in October 2012 the guidelines and roadmap for establishment and implementation of national qualifications frameworks and regional qualifications framework. But the RQF of ECOWAS is not yet officially established, according to our latest information. In addition, in December 2018, ECOWAS validated a draft framework on the recognition and equivalence of higher education degrees. So this framework will offer a grid to analyze and recognize foreign qualifications at regional and national levels with the collaboration of designated agencies and of course in alignment with continental instruments, notably with the Addis Convention on the recognition of qualifications. Next. EAC, East Africa Community. This is a smaller community with 6 member states. It's a dynamic and fairly well integrated regional economic community. In accordance with the treaty for the establishment of the EAC and with the Common Market Protocol, the East African Qualifications Framework for Higher Education was adopted in 2015 by the Council of Ministers as a comprehensive framework of 8 levels, and it works in complementarity with the regional quality assurance system. Implementation of the higher education part of the framework is governed by the Inter-University Council for East Africa, which is an intergovernmental institution of the community. The technical vocational part of the framework is currently undergoing further development. Important to notice that following the results of harmonization process in higher education in the region, the heads of state declared in 2017 the common higher education area of the East African community. And this is a very important milestone towards integration, mobility of learners and workers. Let me finish by saying that Article 11 of the EAC Common Market Protocol provides for the mobility of professionals within the EAC. And to facilitate this, the member states negotiate mutual recognition agreements in several professional domains. Next. So we continue now on the eastern part of the continent, and we look now at the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, which is home to 8 member states. Analysis and dialogue is underway towards development of a regional qualifications framework. And this framework is expected to contribute to address the twin challenges of first, developing adequate skills and competences and providing relevant training for the region's very large young population. And second, and this is very important, providing skills and livelihood opportunities for the large number of migrants and refugees in the region. Very recently, end of April 2021, IGAD held its first regional technical experts meeting on the Kampala Declaration of 2019, which is about jobs, livelihoods, and self-reliance for refugees, returnees, and host communities in the IGAD region. The Kampala Declaration promotes inclusion of refugees in national education systems, vocational training, and labor markets. Next. We will have a dedicated slot on the ACQF. So I've immediately passed the floor. Next.
Thanks, Eduarda. The global perspective. So we hope that this first glimpse at AQF initiatives across the globe has given you a first impression of the developments that are ongoing across the continents. Knowing, of course, that trying to sum up 17 initiatives in just over 15 minutes can only be a very incomplete affair. Next, please. What we hope that this first part of our presentation has given you a taste of is the breadth and scope of AQF initiatives to date. And this also takes us to the comparative element of our study on regional qualification frameworks. Next, please. As part of this study, we have set out to analyze and to compare these framework initiatives on the basis of a number of criteria, which can be summarized in terms of the following key questions. I've simply listed them here, but we'll tell you a bit more about each of them in the following slides. It was not our intention to analyze each framework according to all these criteria. It was also a very small study after all, but to compare them and also to underpin some general observations with specific examples and to show how these features of regional qualifications frameworks might influence this comparison process, for instance, with the EQF. No. Next, please. The first question that we deal with is ownership and commitment of regional qualifications frameworks. So who are the owners and supporters of the initiatives, and what are their resources and capacities for the development and the implementation of the initiative? One very important additional aspect refers to the support provided by donor organizations and international organizations. The question of ownership and commitment is an important one because one can assume that the role and capacity of the institutions behind the framework largely determine the progress and performance against defined objectives, naturally. We observe that the majority of the RQFs are part of regional communities, and you've heard that in the presentation before. In some other cases, regional qualifications framework initiatives have been developed by non-state actors, for instance, in particular organizations of quality assurance agencies. Next, please. So what do these RQF initiatives seek to achieve? Are they more geared, for instance, towards promoting free movement of people and integration, or rather more towards quality assurance in education and training, or do they have other purposes in mind altogether? We can broadly identify the following objectives that RQF initiatives generally want to achieve. First, to promote the mobility of workers and learners. Mobility and migration, of course, plays an important role in many of these initiatives. Aryan has mentioned this before, also in the Asia and Arab migration context, for instance. Second, quality assurance for mutually trusted qualifications as a broad aim. And third, transparency and comparability of qualifications together with increased harmonization. These broad objectives are not mutually exclusive, and most RQFs indeed have more than one single objective, although it is indeed possible to distinguish different initiatives according to their primary focus. I mentioned before that the majority of RQFs are part of regional economic communities. So in many cases, the policy framework and the objectives of these RQFs are, of course, closely tied to the objectives of the economic communities. Next, please. If we take a look at the scope of the initiatives, so this is asking about, do they cover all types of qualifications, or do they focus on certain areas like technical vocational education only or higher education only, or do they focus on certain levels only? To what extent do they address the aspect of lifelong learning or refer to arrangements for the validation of non-formal and informal learning? Our research has shown that the scope of RQFs varies. Some initially focused either on higher education or on vocational education and training, but we also see a clear trend towards comprehensive or unified frameworks. And this means that they are designed in a way to include, or at least potentially include, qualifications from various levels, from primary education to PhD level, and also various sectors of education and training. RQFs are generally based on the concept of learning outcomes. And as regards the number of levels in a framework, we observe a prevalence of 10-level frameworks across the globe. Next, please.
Yes, so where are they now in their implementation? CEDEFOP and ETF, they developed a common set of stages for qualification framework, starting from exploration, what kind of framework we want, designing the qualification framework, to adoption, activation, and becoming fully operational. This is followed by a review of frameworks often, and then the whole cycle starts again with redesign, readoption, etc. I will provide a link on our joint paper in the chat. It's not the right link, sorry. It's not formally published yet. NQFs and RQFs develop in parallel, and they can strengthen each other. Most RQFs are not fully operational, considering that NQFs in the regions are not yet connected to the RQF. So that's really important for us. And what we saw in our work is that only the AQRF and the SADC qualification frameworks have really advanced quite a lot in the area of referencing or aligning. So they are the ones with which we can now compare. Next.
Are there links between the individual regional qualifications frameworks? Yes, absolutely. RQFs often have links with other RQFs, for instance, in terms of common members. To name just one example is Trinidad and Tobago, which is both part of the CQF, the CARICOM qualifications framework, but also covered by the scope of the transnational qualifications framework, the TQF. So this is just one simple example of one of these linkages. The figure you can see here shows you the key linkages between the different RQF initiatives in terms of their geographic coverage. It does not intend to be super accurate. It probably cannot be in one slide, but it simply seeks to give you the bigger picture by emphasizing the global perspective behind these developments and also the potential outreach. Indeed, many key informants during our research emphasize their interest in more dialogue with other regional qualifications frameworks, both for the purpose of mutual learning and also for sharing experience, but also with regard to labor migration. Next, please.
Yes, so when we look now at the situation, if we compare the countries and where can we share actually our experiences. So we see that every RQF tries to offer a fit-for-purpose solution. So they're not one copy of each other. But what was very clear in the discussions we had last year is that there is quite a big interest in sharing and mutual learning. And also, we have identified 5 C's that are very important, I think. The first one is the COVID-19 response. COVID really has met a crisis for all the globe. It's a global crisis. And also many countries are middle-income countries and low-income countries, and they're facing a slowdown of developments. Then a second area of interest are common qualifications. We have seen in the Caribbean, for instance, that they have Caribbean vocational qualifications, which even predate the Caribbean qualification framework. And other frameworks are also aiming to develop those common qualifications. Climate change and green growth. The TQF and the PQF, they really are advanced. They have already developed common courses on how to address climate change and green growth. Catalogs, database and qualifications. The PQF is linked with the specific register of qualification standards as a repository of quality assured qualifications in the region. So they have one register. And also they will integrate micro-credentials, common guidelines. There are many frameworks that are developing common guidelines. SADC has common guidelines on quality assurance, recognition of qualifications, credit accumulation and transfer. The ACQF is developing a lot of guidelines. Also in the EQF, we have guidelines. And the ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework has a new guidelines, for instance, on referencing, just adopted. So there are a lot of issues we can share. Next. So the EQF is not the global standard. The RQFs that are existing are not copies of the EQF. Every RQF is unique. So many RQF initiatives are benchmarked against the EQF. The EQF has been inspiring others, but they are not copied. So comparison that is now as a possibility possible, that of course creates an important opportunity to connect the RQFs. And there's a strong interest in cooperation with the EQF, and other RQFs are going beyond only just linking the levels. There is actually an interest in experience sharing, interest in recognition of qualifications. And for instance, in the EQF, we have developed Europass and ESCO as tools to understand qualifications better, to link them through a digital tool. And actually, that is where also many other frameworks are going. So more recognition because of digital technologies, because of our ability to compare qualifications and to have to move from a paper-based recognition system to much more one that is electronic. And this also offers opportunities for interoperable systems that can be used also for guidance and counseling and for other purposes. So there are many communalities and there is scope for more dialogue. Next. So if we look at the feasibility of comparison, we've already talked about it quite a lot. So the EQF comparison is based on dialogue. It is not comparing to the EQF in a sense that the EQF is the standard. Both frameworks need to be equal, and therefore there needs to be a dialogue. But the dialogue needs to be based on common interest. And the EQF comparison is open for operational qualification framework, as we said. Because most frameworks are in early stage of development, and because many also have difficulties to advance, especially in COVID, we think it's important that we look also at other forms of cooperation. we are going to start piloting the comparison of the EQF with the SADC qualification framework. And next year, we hope that we can share the experiences. Also, during the development of the EQF, we've been discussing other forms of collaboration, but this was not the mandate of the group. So we have not advanced very much in it. And we actually need your inputs in order to decide where we're going to focus on in our joint cooperation. Now, let us first look at the ACQF, which is really an example of dialogue and cooperation. Next.
The African Continental Qualifications Framework, ACQF. This is the future largest RQF. It's in development. Next. The ACQF will be the largest of the regional qualifications frameworks as it cooperates with 55 countries and 8 regional economic communities. In fact, it is the only RQF interacting with 2 different levels, the national and regional. Enablers and opportunities of the ACQF relate with the demographic dividend of the continent, projected advances in human development, the significant flagship policies and strategies for continental integration related with the African Union Agenda 2063, and especially free trade, free movement of persons, the continental education strategy for Africa. But also those strategies promoting the green recovery and digital transformation. And most importantly, there is a growing number of national qualifications frameworks in development and in consultation, as well as those that are already approved and advancing in implementation. But this is very important to note. The continent is facing important challenges, and the education crisis is one of the most pressing priorities. The EU is an important partner of the African Union, supporting most of the indicated strategies and policies. Next. We just said it. Development of the ACQF is backed by all critical African Union policies listed here, and you will have time to get better acquainted. Next. The vision for this ACQF is to enhance comparability, quality, and transparency of qualifications from all subsectors and levels of education and training, supporting people's lifelong learning outcomes, to facilitate recognition of diplomas and certificates, and mobility of learners and workers, to work in complementarity and in cooperation with national and regional qualifications frameworks and support the creation of a common African education space, and promote cooperation and alignment between qualifications frameworks, national, regional, in Africa and worldwide. Next. The principles of the ACQF are inclusiveness, innovation readiness, openness to users, stakeholders' needs, and of course, a global cooperation. Next. Next. Development of the ACQF is underway. It started in September 2019 and will go on until end 2022. This process is supported by the European Union through the Skills for Youth Employability Program, carried out in partnership with GIZ and European Training Foundation, and with involvement of all stakeholders. Next. The ACQF policy and technical document with action plan and a set of technical guidelines and tools, including a website, is the package planned of the planned outputs of this work. It's also important to notice the place of capacity development and networking in the ACQF project activities. Next. The ACQF mapping study was the first step of the project. It represents a substantial contribution to an updated knowledge base on qualifications frameworks in Africa. The process involved 41 countries through the online survey, technical country visits, peer learning activities, and the review process of all reports. I'd like to greet James Kivy, Andrea Bateman, Jean Adotevi, here present today. I think we did a great job together on the ACQF mapping study. Next. The mapping study is more than a report. It's a collection of 13 country reports, 3 regional reports, and a comprehensive continental analysis in 3 different formats. Next. The mapping study identified, let's say, a rather favorable situation in terms of qualifications frameworks on the continent. So 21 qualifications frameworks, and these are national as well as sectoral. For example, higher education or TVET are adopted or in implementation, plus 18 in development, consultation, and early thinking. 2 RQFs are also in implementation. So this is a favorable starting basis for the future ACQF. I think we all remember in 2008, so 12 years ago, when the EQF was adopted, entered into function, there were 3 only national qualifications frameworks in Europe. Next. Capacity development and networking. Next. The capacity development 2021 is resuming on 3rd of June with a combination of modalities of learning. We will have 5 peer learning activities between June and October, a conference in December, and also a relatively in-depth training program of 5 days. Next. In 2020, many of you remember and many of you participated. The ACQF project successfully carried out a dynamic program of 7 peer learning activities between July and October. And here on the screen, you can see all the countries and all the experiences that were shared. So next, these peer learning activities shared gathered 22 cases of qualifications frameworks from 3 continents: Africa, Asia, Europe. 17 national qualifications frameworks and 5 RQFs shared their experience, their plans and challenges. All this information is gathered in ETF Open Space for now, before it goes then to the ACQF website. Next and final. Next. In the meanwhile, the options or scenarios for the ACQF development have been proposed and validated by the 2nd ACQF advisory group meeting that took place on 8th of April 2021 as a basis for further development. These 3 options offer a perspective of the way forward in the next 5 years, more or less. So scenario 1 is, we called it ACQF Connects. The focus is on peer sharing, capacity development, benchmarking, common tools. Scenario 2, ACQF creates mutual trust. The focus is on referencing, alignment, and support to recognition of qualifications, recognition of prior learning, qualifications databases. And then a more advanced scenario is scenario 3, ACQF opens new horizons, more ambitious, where ACQF as a continental overarching framework has continental qualifications profiles, automatic mutual recognition of qualifications, digital credentials, and hopefully contributing both to global transparency as well as to internationalization of African qualifications. Thank you. Next.
Sorry, I have to unmute. So this is the last slide, and we've passed the whole presentation as far as we could make it short, because of course there's a lot of information. But to conclude, our presentation is based on the fact that we can see an enormous amount of developments. RQFs are really gaining importance. We see more initiatives, and we see also more RQFs becoming operational. But we have to also consider that they need capacities. They need resources and time to develop, and often these are lacking. So that makes these initiatives vulnerable. There's a balance requirement need, a balance development need, of course. RQFs, of course, are based on what's happening in the region, first of all. So, of course, there needs to be a strong development of the countries in the region to develop them. But we can also consider that there are many issues that can be addressed in cooperation with the wider world, with other RQFs. We have all learned to work online, and physical distances are really less important than before. We are conscious of common challenges, and we can benefit from regular sharing of information, sharing of data, of experiences, of expertise. And we are ready in ETF to support this process as a catalyst, as a facilitator, not as the organizer. Everybody will have to play its role. But what we would like to discuss now is how can we take this finding forward? The fact that there are all these initiatives happening, sometimes in isolation, sometimes in connection. How can we make this cooperation more effective? But before we're going to discuss that, I would like to give the floor for questions, both from LinkedIn as well as from Zoom. So I'm really looking forward now to get the questions from the participants. And I saw already in the chat there were some comments, but there were not so many questions yet. So please, if you have any questions, this is your opportunity. Please put them in the chat.
Arjen.
Yes.
There were a couple of comments, not that much question, but comments from LinkedIn.
Okay.
One was from John April from South Africa. He wrote that it's interesting that there's a growing number of initiatives on qualifications across the world. That was one comment. I don't know if you want to say something about it.
Yes, I also saw in a comment from Nigel Lloyd, who said, why is the US and Canada, why they were not mentioned? Of course, there are initiatives in these countries. Of course, in the case of the US, this is a private initiative, yeah, where we have a degree structure that has been agreed, that is used by different regional quality assurance agencies, but that is not national. But it's also not regional because the US is one country. In that case, we should also have considered the Australian qualification frameworks, a regional framework. For us, this is a national framework. The same in Canada. We know that there are provincial qualification frameworks, for instance, in Quebec and in another provinces. And we also know that there is an initiative to bring these together. We have not considered this as a regional framework, but that's a matter, of course, of understanding and interpretation. But overall, there are really developments. Now I can see some questions coming here. Okay, and there's immediately an answer. So there was a question: were level descriptors compared? If so, did the study come to any conclusion? And then James Skeevy has already presented here the study on level descriptors. There's also been a study on level descriptors in Europe done by CEDEFOP. Of course, these level descriptors are also changing because I've seen, for instance, in our countries, the countries where we work, sometimes they start with one set of level descriptors, then after some time, they are developing other ones. For instance, in Ukraine, we had 10 levels, then 11 levels. Now we have 8 levels. The descriptors are changing. In Moldova, there are 2 different sets of levels. So there is a development. In South Africa, there were first 8 levels. Now there are 10 levels. So level descriptors are not fixed, but level descriptors, we have not compared all the level descriptors of all these countries. But it definitely is going to be part of the exercise when we're going to do comparison.
Arjen.
So Eduarda just wrote that level descriptors were compared in the ACQF mapping study.
Arjen, there is also another question from LinkedIn from Robert Buis. I'm sorry if I'm spelling that wrongly. What is the role of UNESCO in parentheses ESCAT standards?
Yes, so UNESCO is developing a new initiative, which is based on learning outcomes. That is the world reference levels. So UNESCO colleagues are hopefully, they are here, I think, with us, and they could possibly give information on that. The idea is there. Also, John Hart is here, I've seen. He's been the father of this system. So these levels are, let's say, neutral. They are not system bound, they are not region bound, and they have been developed to compare learning outcome statements of levels for different purposes. Then, but these are not yet adopted, they're not yet implemented, they're not yet used widely. Then we have, of course, the ISCAT levels, which also in the last revision of ISCAT were very much influenced by the EQF levels. That's why we moved also to 8 ISCAT levels. However, they are based on different criteria. They also want to take account of learning outcomes, but they're not learning outcome statements per se. They're still based on education programs with their duration, rather than on real learning outcome statements, which are important for recognizing lifelong learning, which are important also for putting smaller qualifications, which become more and more important into these frameworks. Okay, then there is this is a comment, I think. Can we go back to the, so there's a relationship between levels and socioeconomic investments made by the countries and the development of qualification frameworks in those settings. Yeah, of course, levels, they do often reflect somehow also the values that are important in different countries. But we have not been looking at these to this detail. This has not been a comprehensive study in that sense. There is really a lot of things that we still need to work on. So of course, there was the level study some years ago. Now, of course, we have realized that there are many more RQF initiatives, so we will need to look at these things. Okay, then a question: what are the organizations that lead the development of RQFs? We have been looking at this. This has been an aspect of our work. We didn't look in it in very much detail, but if you look at in the study, there are country descriptions, and these country descriptions, they really also cover the governance aspects, and these governance aspects, they are quite different. So for instance, on the Southern African Development Community Framework, there are different committees working at different levels, more technical, more policy oriented, and they work together. So it's really important that whatever questions you have, we are going to address them. But we need to also be aware, I think, of the time that we have. So actually, I would like to give the floor back to Maria now to do another Mentimeter exercise. And then after that, you will be guided into breakout rooms. In these breakout rooms, we would like you to discuss the cooperation that we could establish, could develop between the different RQFs. And we have defined 2 questions, which will be introduced by the facilitators in the breakout rooms. Then after those breakout rooms, we will come back here to have the conclusions of our discussions. Now, I would really like to give the floor back to Maria so that we can move forward as soon as possible.
Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Arjen. So again, dear colleagues, please take your phones with you. And it's the same exercise as it was before. Please open them www.menti.com. You can see now also the QR code on your screen. So you can just open your camera on your phone, put it in front of the QR code, and you will be led automatically to the Mentimeter. You can also see now in the chat, both in LinkedIn and in Zoom, the link to the survey. I will give you 1 minute to open it up. And the question is, why do you think regional qualifications frameworks important? Why are RQFs important? And there are several answers: for cooperation on qualifications in the region, for global transparency of qualifications, for easier portability and mobility in the region, and to support the development of national qualification frameworks, NQFs. So again, if you could open Mentimeter and answer the question, why are RQFs important? And in a minute, I think we can project, the results. So 45 people said that RQFs are important for easier portability and mobility in the region. And the next most responded option is for global transparency of qualifications. And then the other two have similar amount of votes. So to support development of NQFs and for cooperation on qualifications in the region have both 9% of votes. Arjen, anything to comment on the results? I think we have two winners here with equal amount of votes.
It's very interesting to see that people look beyond their regions and they look at global transparency of qualifications, not only within their own region. So it's clear that those RQFs have a function even that go outside the region. So that's very interesting, and that also helps us to now move to the next part of our discussion, where you will be active. So let's go to the breakout rooms.
Okay, Arjen, do you want to announce or we go? Okay, we go directly. And for our LinkedIn followers, please stay here because one of the working groups will stay with you.
Okay, so welcome in this breakout room. I don't know if everybody has arrived here already in my room.
I think people are still coming, maybe 1 minute more, Arjen.
Yes,
people are still coming and joining. Also, while we wait, if our LinkedIn followers would like to participate in this conversation and make their questions, please post them on LinkedIn chat. Thank you.
So if we are now complete, can I just send to all of you a link? I'm sorry. So welcome to this group. I hope we are all here. Can I check if that's the case? Could you please open your cameras, because we are not so many now.
Yes, we're still assigning some participants to the workout rooms. Okay.
So maybe just 1 more minute. Yeah. Arjen, maybe for those that are here for the moment, can you tell us what is this link?
Yes,
just posted.
So what we're going to do now is an exercise where we're going to look at 2 questions, and you will be guided to these questions by this link. It will take you to a canvas where you will be asked to answer these questions. So the first question has to do with what do you see as the main constraints, the main issues that we could address together? So what are the main constraints that you see for your framework? So those people, I see a lot of people from the EQF. What do you see those issues that we could address together with other colleagues? But I see also, for instance, Frans Gertse, he's active in the transnational qualification framework and in the SADC qualification framework. We have also Howard Davis here from the UK. He's very active internationally in higher education. So please click on the mural and it will take you automatically to another tab. So if you can do that. and then you enter as a visitor.
I see a lot of pointers coming, so I think people are in the board.
So, why do we have a question in Spanish here? Let me go back to the room, the first room. Okay, this is our room. Sorry, could you please press on the top outline, room 1, morning, English. Have you found it?
So it's turquoise color. It's really light blue.
Yes. So BO room, morning, English. Are you there? Okay, now, please, if you want to write on one of these are post-its. So you just click on them and you can write on them. If you, so we want you to answer the first question, and please write one post-it. What is the most pressing need for the RQF you are involved in that could be addressed through international cooperation with other RQFs? So please just click on them and type. If you have any difficulties, please talk, because it's difficult to see the chat now. Have you arrived?
I can see
nobody writing.
No, people started to write, yes.
Yes. Okay, our work with recognition would be helped with more referencing. Okay, so that's the first one. Please, only the first question. I'll give you 3 more minutes and then we're going back to Zoom. So far, only one input. So go to room 1, morning, English. Yeah. So it's on the top, on the right, on the outline. And you write, yes, I have a second one. The establishment of RQF database is similar to the EQF qualification dataset register. So that's also a common issue. Anybody else? I see a lot of activity, but I don't see a lot of writing.
There's another one coming, Arin.
Yes, there's another one coming. Cooperation among RQF should be a meta level, at meta level, otherwise it is getting too complicated. Any other points? I see Salai, you're here with us. Please, when we had a discussion, you indicated some issues also. Just click on the whatever post-it you want to have, and you want to have another post-it, you can create one also by double clicking. and please write, just type in them. Also, Heidi, I see that you're there. You have a lot of experience from SAQA and from SADC. Database on different comprehension of qualifications. Okay, different education systems and qualifications brought together. Okay, establish a common understanding. Now people are starting to write. So let's take one more minute. Okay, can we just conclude here? Maybe we just take 1 minute. Let's go, click on below on your screen. You have the Zoom. If there is anybody who would like to say something, please raise your hand. You can do that in the reactions under in your screen. Just say raise hand.
It would be a good idea maybe to open the floor so people maybe want to comment on the replies.
Exactly.
Actually.
So who would like to say something? Can I ask somebody maybe? Paulette, I see that you're there and you have been involved in the Caribbean framework right from the start. Would you like to comment?
Dennis, hello.
Dennis, you have to close your microphone. No? Can I ask anybody else? Anybody who wants to speak? Just open your microphone. I see Sean watching, and Wolfgang.
I can say something, Arjan, if you like.
Yes, please.
Well, I wrote on the post-it note about from the recognition perspective. When we receive, so we evaluate applications for recognition in Sweden, about 30,000 per year, and when we receive those from people from countries where there's an NQF reference to the EQF, it gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of recognizing it in Sweden. And we can push down the minimum limit, move towards recognition of micro qualifications, perhaps even move towards recognition of non-formal learning if it's recognized in the member state that they're coming from. So we'd of course like to see, from a recognition perspective, more of these regional NQFs referencing somehow to the EQF, or at least from individual NQFs referencing to the EQF. And we see that with, I believe, some non-member states, and that's useful in terms of international mobility and recognition.
Add in your mic.
Can I ask somebody else? Howard, would you be able to say something, or maybe Paulette from the Caribbean? Could we have somebody from the other frameworks? I saw Salai earlier, but I don't see her here in the overview. So,
okay, this is Paulette.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, it's very early in the morning. So, but one of the challenges we have been having in the Caribbean is communication and a lack of understanding among the various territories. Some territories have national qualification frameworks. Some are just developing. but the CARICOM qualifications framework is the regional qualification framework, is the regional framework. But there's lack of interconnectivity between the NQFs and the RQFs. So, and things have kind of stalled in the Caribbean. So in going forward, one of the things that I would like to see happen in the region is a body coming together to review the RQF. It was developed in 2012, and things have really just stalled. So how can we get things moving again? I think that is where we are in the Caribbean.
Thank you, thank you. And do you see any role there of others, for instance, of the European colleagues? Would we help you with these things?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm just in touch with the CARICOM Commission, but again, I think the lack of knowledge or the lack of resources is hampering the progress. But we would really like to see greater connectivity or greater communication, or tapping into the ETF in going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Sean, when you talked about recognition, were you talking only about higher education qualifications, which is often the field where there is, or also about vocational? And how do you see the role of frameworks in promoting recognition of vocational qualifications?
The main challenge actually lies with vocational qualifications. The higher recognition of higher education degrees typically is more straightforward and easier for us. What's more challenging is to recognize vocational qualifications, whether they're at a secondary or post-secondary or sector level, because we don't necessarily have a similar comparison object in Sweden. With higher education, we usually have bachelor, master, PhD from in the entire world, so it's a lot easier. So it's the main benefit with potential referencing between NQFs and the EQF, for example, is for vocational qualifications.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next question because time is around. So we go back to the mural and we try to answer the next question. So if you are still, if you use the link, go again to the top, yeah. If you use, and go to the BO room 1. So I can see others are really.
So Arjen, the second question is.
Yeah, so the second question is, how would you be prepared to contribute to cooperation between RQFs, you personally, or your organization, or your framework? Yeah, you could answer all those levels. So I have here a comment, understanding of the challenges of the RQFs, of an RQF. So that's probably more question 1 than question 2, or not? To bring experience of the Netherlands. This is Thijs, I hope, yeah? So that's very good. Are there any other people who are ready to really volunteer? And now I see also we have much more still issues there. On the other one, please go to question 2 because our time is limited. I will put this. So I have here another one. Might be useful with more information regulated. Can I have to.
On regulated professions, Aren.
Yes, on regulated professions. This is also an issue that is, of course, very important. And where there are a lot of regulations that are national even, not even regional. In Europe, we have a very complex system for that. So please add your comments. With my training in adult education and experience in the field, and and I see also there's a very small one there in one of the. Please, you can make your posters larger by just clicking on them and enlarging them. Yeah, so there is a very small one. Can we move that and make it bigger? Because yes, okay. Oh, but that's the double one. I see. So
just to remind also to our LinkedIn followers, Aren, maybe while we're waiting for more input, that you can click on the link that you will find in the chat on the collaborative board and participate in this exercise as well. Thank you.
yes, and we give people still 1 minute, and then we really need to have our final discussion because we will be thrown out of this room soon.
No, we will stay actually in this room. Others will join.
Room, yes. Then we have 6 minutes left.
Okay, 6 minutes left. So we need about 5 for discussions. So in a minute, please. Just click on the on any post that you see and just write on it. Might be useful with more information on regulated professions that we've seen already, referencing NQFs to RQF. So that, of course, is an issue all our RQFs are dealing with. Of course, sometimes it's not called referencing, sometimes it's called alignment. For instance, in the case of South Africa or the Southern African Development Community. And also sometimes it's based on quite different principles. For instance, there are new guidelines now in the AQRF that were actually developed because they started with an approach that was very much close to what we had in the EQF, and then changed the approach. Be part of a dialogue and contribute experience. I mean, I can say for myself, I've been working in a lot of countries, and actually every country you're in, the conditions are different, the issues are different, and it really helps you to get a different view on what you can do with the qualification framework, how to move it forward, how to implement them more effectively. And we have also been developing a number of guides for NQFs on how to help them with implementation. But I think other organizations also have done it. Let's go back now to the discussion. So, who can I give the floor? There was somebody who was Cynthia. You are, and I'm very happy you're here actually.
Hi, Arjen.
Hi. You're from the AQRF. Did you write anything specific?
No, I'm no longer with AQRF, but I have a colleague here, still a member of the committee. Yeah.
So did you write anything specific on what you see as a possible role?
So well, in our case, it's really helping because we still have some of our AQRF members who are not yet referenced. So whatever help we can give, because we've finished the referencing process, and then maybe exchange with some of our colleagues from the other RQFs.
So referencing is really the issue for you.
For us, yes.
To move beyond the 4 countries that you have done.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
And I think here is a similar question of Dr. Kebebe Casa from IGAT. The challenge for RQFs is how to establish consensus from member states on how to harmonize. Of course, harmonization in the European context is a very difficult work. Okay, I see that Jorgos is already here. Are we all together now?
Yes, I think this is the plenary now, Arjen.
Okay.
Is that correct?
In 30 seconds, breakout room will be closed.
So from my group, colleagues are now connected with plenary. So we've done our job. Whenever you want, I can share my screen.
We miss other groups, so maybe 30 seconds more, then we.
But maybe, Jorgos, you can maybe share your screen for a second, then we can see what you have done in your group.
Okay, I'm doing that now. Okay, share screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Very impressive. You've done really a lot.
We didn't manage to group everything. Sorry for that, but I'm not a specialist myself. So colleagues started doing it themselves by changing the colors. So some of them you see they are grouped. But I think that would be your input more to group.
We are going to analyze all of this and bring it together in a joint report. And then we will come back, because actually this is just a start of a discussion. Okay, so Jorgos, can you unshare so that we can start with the conclusion section of because we're really running out of time. Could I have the PowerPoint presentation for the conclusions? Yes. So as we've said, I mean, of course, we need to draw this to a close, because we said we will do this for 2 hours, and it's 2 hours out of everybody's agenda. So we'll try to stick to time. What I think is very important, can we go to the next slide, is that we now move from ideas to action. So how are we going to move forward? Of course, there are already a number of initiatives that are supporting RQFs, either within a framework like the ACQF, or within a framework like the World Reference Levels Group, which is established by UNESCO. Of course, those can be also maybe better used, and we can maybe see how we can involve others in those. But also there are other initiatives that will need to be developed from the ground up, where we will need to facilitate, share information, etc. So if we can now go to the next slide. A very critical point for every framework is COVID. It really has forced us to rethink how we work, how we learn, and how we recognize learning. We have all started to co-work online, and this, of course, is a huge opportunity in a global setting, because we can now do things that were impossible by having to travel from all the countries. But we also see that COVID has really affected the economies, all the economies, and it was a topic in every discussion that we had with the RQFs. And we can see actually that public budgets for qualifications have gone down. For instance, we've seen very recently how SAQA has really become much smaller. And also we've seen how the Gulf qualification framework has had difficulty to develop, also because of lack of support, lack of... So what is the role of RQFs in COVID recovery? Can we go to the next slide? First of all, we have to understand what is the role of qualifications, and that's often misunderstood. Also in my own organization, but I think everywhere, people see qualifications as a technical topic. So at one hand, we have new needs from the labor market, from society, from individuals developing. On the other hand, we need to change the provision. We need to change the way we learn. There are new ways of learning, much more individualized, there is in education, training provision, and how is this often done? This is often done through qualification. So qualifications have a very important bridging role. Of course, they also have a signaling role in saying what kind of qualification people have. They have an important role. They are part of every system. And I don't think any parent would send their kids to study something for which they would not get a qualification. So they do matter. But this needs to be understood by people. So next slide. Of course, when we look at 2021, we are in a year of transition. We are not yet completely out of the COVID situation. But we have to think about it. We have to prepare ourselves. So let's click on the next one. So one of the things is that half of us will need to reskill in the next 5 years. But this is the double disruption that has happened because of the economic impact. Many people have to completely relearn new jobs. So there's a huge need for upskilling and reskilling. And the pandemics really changed the way we work, but also what we work on. The next one. Also, successful reskilling starts from knowing what skills are needed. So both right now and in the near future, offering tailored learning approaches to meet them and evaluating what does and does not work. And here we need to also exchange more information. We've seen that there has been experimenting around micro-credentials. We've seen, for instance, that green skills, they have been really addressed by some of the frameworks, the transnational qualification frameworks, the Pacific qualification frameworks. These are really very valuable developments. They are the future for all of us. Next, sorry. Then, of course, what we also see is that the public sector needs to provide stronger support for reskilling, upskilling. But of course, often this is a problem because they don't have the resources. So there is especially also a role for equity and inclusion, and qualifications play a role in equity and inclusion because they actually provide a common, especially if they're national qualifications, a minimal threshold that everybody will need to meet. So let's go to the next one. Now, qualification frameworks, they can be part of this transformation. They could address the post-COVID challenges and opportunities. They could be part of building back better, making our systems more ready for the future. A lot of people are going to change jobs. Transitions have already become much more common than they were before, but this becomes even stronger in the future. So for that, they will need to have some kind of proof of what they're able of. So also there is a lot of interplay between RQFs and NQFs where we can actually exchange experiences in better addressing the post-COVID crisis. So let's go to the next one. So what are the opportunities for RQFs? First of all, of course, the situation doesn't look too good. There are limited resources, it seems, available. But on the other hand, COVID-19 offers an unprecedented opportunities because it's global, because we have to also find global solutions between ourselves. So we're talking about large-scale solutions that can address the needs of many NQFs. We talk about sharing common knowledge, and we talk about also regional impacts. The RQFs are not very regulatory tools. They are more part of soft power. So this is about active players in crisis recovery. So what can we do to reskill people? How can we help that? How can we recognize that? How can we support learning? How can we make people innovation ready? How can we use digitalization? So let's go to the last slide. So it's all about cooperation. We are in this together. So how can we share experiences? We have to share more experiences. We have to remove the boundaries and the barriers between our frameworks. We're often in boxes, and actually this cooperation can help us to overcome those. For instance, in Europe, we have very specific limitations because of the legislation of the EU, which really makes a lot of the issues on qualifications a national responsibility. So everybody needs to be on board, and we can learn from other regions how they resolve these issues. Could we have a joint plan of action? Could we have a joint product with resources? For instance, one of the things that was mentioned by this morning was that actually a lot of planning for EU support, and the EU is the largest donor in the world, is actually starting now for the next years. And next year also the Erasmus program will be open for projects that could address qualification frameworks worldwide, in which everybody would be able to participate. So we need to see how we can deal with that. So we could see also if we can have a joint platform. We are offering a joint platform on open space. So this is the time now, because there is no time. And our time is really up here as well. So can I just have the last slide? So if you then all open your cameras, yeah, and we stop sharing, and just let's all greet each other, and let's complete this global get together. And I really want to thank everybody for being here, because this is really unique. We really have people here that are really on the other side of the globe of where I'm sitting now. And I really think that is very important. We could only start what we wanted to discuss here. We need to dialogue between all of us. And we are going to go back to you after this event. We're going to give you the links, and we hope that we will be able to start a real dialogue in which we also want people to pledge their own support, because we need to do this together. This cannot be put forward by one organization only. Thank you very much for attending. Those who are really interested to follow another session, we are going to start again at 16:30, but I think
only in Zoom this case. So we will also, I would like
Zoom.
to thank all our LinkedIn followers who stayed with us for all of the duration of this session. Thank you so much.
This afternoon, the focus will be more on the Americas. So thank you very much for participating, and I hope to see you all soon. Stay well, and please send us your ideas after this event. I know it was impossible to capture everything, but we will get back to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.
Goodbye.